Well, welcome back to West End Resilience Live for this, our final webinar of the year. We've got a great guest lined up for you today. We've got Andy Byford, who is a newly appointed London Transport Commissioner. He has joined at a very interesting time in the middle of the pandemic. And of course, that has had a profound effect in terms of the way that London's transport system has worked. He'll be talking about that and also talking about the whole issue of transport over the Christmas period as we enter that too. He'll also be looking at longer term issues like getting the Elizabeth line up and running as quickly as possible. We want you to, as always, put your questions to him, and you can do that by clicking on the question mark icon, which you should be able to see on your webinar window right now. Before we hear from Andy, let's cross over to New West End Chief Operating Officer Dee Causey. Dee, over to you.
Thank you, Martin. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining today. Public transport is so important to the West End, with over 70% of our customers and colleagues alike arriving on it, making it vitally important for our reopening. Just before I hand over to Andy, I just wanted to touch on a couple of our advocacy points that we are working on as New West End Company as part of our recovery planning. Firstly, tax-free shopping. We continue to coordinate the campaign to overturn the government's decision to end tax-free shopping. As you all know, it is very difficult to overturn a decision already made, but we continue to work with Treasury and Number 10, as well as running a media campaign and supporting a judicial review. The next landmark date for this is the 25th of November, when the Chancellor makes his financial statement. Secondly, Sunday trading. In the short term, we are supporting calls from the BRC and others for temporary longer opening hours, particularly in the run-up to Christmas, to enable safer, socially distant shopping. In the longer term, as you will know, we continue to promote calls for the West End and Knightsbridge International Centre to be exempt from Sunday trading. Thirdly, business rates. In the short term, we are pushing for a one-year extension to the business rates holiday from the 1st of April 2021, particularly for city centre businesses. In the longer term, we have responded to the government's call for evidence on a fundamental reform of the business rate system. Lastly, the Oxford Street District transformation. We continue to work with Westminster City Council to support the 150 million Oxford Street District transformation. We are promoting greater flexibility of uses in the international city centre, and we have responded to the council's review of its licensing policy, as we are concerned that some of the points are slightly more restrictive in elements of the West End. Lastly, from an operations perspective, we continue to work with our partners to ensure a COVID secure and best in class reopening of the West End from hopefully the 3rd of December. With that in mind, we are delighted to have the recently appointed Transport Commissioner on West End Resilience Live, and New West End Company, on behalf of West End businesses, really values this important partnership with Transport for London. Andy is here to talk about the immediate priorities, but also the Elizabeth line opening and the Oxford Street transformation with Westminster City Council, both of which are clearly key to us here in the West End. So without further delay, let me hand over to Andy Byford, Transport Commissioner. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Dee, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be able to speak with you today. And I say that actually, as although I'm not a Londoner, I'm from Plymouth. I grew up in Plymouth, and I did live in the West End for a long time, actually. My wife and I used to live in Riding House Street, just near the BBC. We lived in Wigmore Street, we lived in Fitzroy Street. So I'm very familiar with the West End. It was kind of my hangout. I know a lot of good pubs in the West End and a lot of good shops. So it's painful for me to see the way it is at the moment. And obviously it's great now to be able to be back in London after 10 years actually away in my transit career in New York City, in Australia and in Canada. It's great to be back in London, and one of the things that attracted me to the job was actually doing my bit, hopefully doing my bit to help get London back on its feet as in such a critical role as Commissioner. And also to pick up where Martin left off. I mean, he said, I think in his intro, it's a bit of an odd time to be taking on this job? Well, certainly that's a real understatement. It's the most surreal intro to any job I've ever had, in that I haven't met most of my colleagues. We're the same as everyone else. We're in lockdown, and we have a lot of people on furlough, and the actual ridership has been decimated. So it's a bit of an odd time to take over, but this is a job I really wanted to do. So let me just talk about that then. I set my organization 2 clear objectives, and I just wanted to go through them with you now. And those 2 objectives were to lead TfL through and beyond the coronavirus pandemic, and that takes myriad forms. And I'll unpack each of these in a moment. But that means sorting out the finances of TfL, which quite simply have been decimated. It means rebuilding the morale of the organisation, which has taken a bit of a hit, as you might imagine, same as your organisation and your people. And it also means safely getting ridership back as a key part of London's economy. Without a viable transport system, obviously London really can't thrive. And the second, an equal top priority for me, certainly in the first part of my tenure, something I majored upon in the job interview process, was to get the Crossrail project finished and to get the Elizabeth line open. And again, I'll come back to that. So let's talk about coronavirus first of all. It's no exaggeration to say that the pandemic has had a catastrophic, a calamitous impact upon TfL finances. Our ridership absolutely plunged as we did what government asked us to do. We safely shut down work sites, but we made space for critical workers. We asked customers to only travel if it was absolutely essential. So we went along with government advice, and we went along with government messaging, and very quickly ridership absolutely plummeted to levels that have not been seen for over 100 years, literally down to, in some cases, 5% on the tube. So we did our bit. We safely carried critical workers about by creating that additional capacity. And then since then, we've been working to safely get ridership back up to a more viable level. And here's how we've gone about it. Job number 1 is to give customers confidence. So we've put huge amounts of effort into keeping the network clean. We've deployed industrial level cleaning to not just the tube, but to the buses and to all the other modes that we operate. So we've been not only doing more cleaning, we've been doing it more frequently. We've been doing it in a highly visible fashion, using our wonderful cleaning staff to be out there cleaning the system and making sure that customers see that we're putting real effort into making sure that all of the touch points are kept clean. We have been installing sanitizers. There's over 1,000 hand sanitizers across the network, and we make sure we keep them regularly topped up. We've been using innovative approaches such as UV lighting on handrails, escalator handrails. It's something that we've pioneered, where you can blitz the virus if there's any virus present on the escalator handrail. Every rotation of that handrail, and that's pretty frequent, the virus is exposed to an ultraviolet light, and that's been proven to kill it and other bacteria. So having trialed that at Heathrow, we're now rolling that out in over 100 stations. So this is an unprecedented effort in terms of keeping things clean. And don't just take our word for it. We've also, because we think this is important, we've engaged academia, namely Imperial College, to undertake independent surveys to actually sample the air and to sample touch points, to test touch points to see if any COVID is present. And to date, not one trace of COVID has been found, which I'm very proud of, and that's testament to my team and to the cleaning teams and to the effort that we put into this. The people from Imperial, they choose where they go. We don't dictate that. They can choose wherever they want, but so far so good. So that's a key part of the strategy. Number 1. Number 2 is to maintain an enforced or a controlled environment. It's very important to customers that they see that people are wearing masks, that we are asking people to wear masks, and if necessary, we're enforcing mask wearing for anyone other than those who have a legitimate exemption. So we have been working with the British Transport Police and our own enforcement teams to educate in the first place, to cajole, but if necessary to enforce the wearing of masks. And in some cases, people have been denied boarding the service. In some cases, they've been ejected from the service. And in some cases, negative though it sounds, we have been fining people. We don't want to do that. But if you don't have an exemption and you just, you think you're too cool for school and you just don't want to wear a mask, that's not acceptable. It's antisocial, it's unfair. So we are enforcing that. And then the third strand of our approach has been to maintain social distancing by running the maximum service. So where some people have said to us, this is ridiculous, why are you still running service on, say, for example, the Victoria line, a train, every 100 seconds? Well, it's because the more service you run on the trains, on the trams, on the buses, the more service you run, the more social distancing you can maintain. And those three elements, a controlled environment, a clean environment, and a socially distanced environment, have seen a progressive return to public transport. So from that initial plunge to around 5% of ridership, we had built the service back up to over 32 and probably around 35% on average on the tube of compared to the ridership of last year, a normal year. And on the buses, a much more robust recovery, we were up to nearly 60% of normal ridership. But of course, the introduction of the second lockdown has seen that slip back. So we have seen it slip back, not as far as the first lockdown, because schools are still open and there are more shops open that are allowed to be open under the government's legislation. But we have seen a slow decline back to a much lower ridership. What else are we doing? We're keeping businesses informed. We're keeping schools informed, freight operators informed, taxi operators informed, and we do that by using our extensive social media network. We have sent out literally, it must be nearly hundreds of millions by now of social media messages to various audiences to make sure that people know what's going on in terms of the service and the measures that we're taking to give Londoners confidence that they can get back onto the service. So we reached out to schools to ensure that if where possible they could stagger the ridership so that we didn't end up with too many people on our buses or our tubes. We've reached out. Hopefully you guys have been recipients of the various communications that we've sent out directly to businesses and through the West End Company and other organisations to inform you what we're doing as we progressively got the service back up and running. We've also launched an app, the TfL Go app, which I think is really good. If you haven't got it, please download it. It shows you not only what the prevailing state of the network is in terms of punctuality and any problems that are going on. We've also given information about the busiest times on the network and what's the best time to travel if you want to avoid being on a train that's overly busy. So we're really trying to build people's confidence. And certainly I've been pushing with government. We really must not slip back into any kind of messaging that gives the impression that transport is dangerous. It isn't. There is no evidence that transport is a super spreader. Some people have alleged that, but scientific evidence shows that that's not the case. So our message to our customers, and we've been doing adverts on the radio and adverts on via social media. We're saying we're ready when you are. It's clean, it's controlled, and it's socially distanced. So a huge push, and I'm crystal clear that the role of public transport is critical in getting London back up and running on its feet. But at the end of the day, people have to have an objective. They have to have offices to go to, schools that they want their kids to attend, and shops that they want to shop in. So where people sometimes say, oh, well, the reason for London being a ghost town is because people are afraid of using transport. I think that's simplistic. I think ultimately it's because people aren't going to the office. That's one of the primary reasons. So we're not being passive on this. We're taking aggressive action to make sure that we're ready when you are, and we will continue to push that message. Now, of course, a lot of this is linked to funding, and there's been well-documented narrative around the impact that the coronavirus has had on TfL's funding. What this virus has exposed is TfL's overexposure to events such as this. We are funded 72% through the fare box. That is unprecedented pretty much across the world. Most transit systems are funded maybe 50 or less % through the fare box. In fact, my old job, my former employer, the Metropolitan Transportation Authority in New York City Transit, of which I was the president, was around 32%. So what this has shown is that if your ridership plunges, your revenue plunges, and you're in all sorts of difficulties. So we are now entirely beholden to government in the short term to give us financial assistance. The good news is we just secured an additional 6 months funding, and that came with some conditions. I thought it was a fair deal. It was grueling negotiation, but we got there, and we got there on Halloween, actually, another 6-month deal. But I really want to move us beyond these brinkmanship last-minute deals. You can't run a £10 billion organisation not knowing what your funding is minute by minute. So we need to secure a long-term financial deal for TfL, one that will help us power the London economy, one that will help us drive the UK's recovery, and that needs to be based on a much more diverse revenue base than just expecting people to pay through the fare box. It's got to be way more imaginative, way more sophisticated than that. Now, one of the means of improving our bottom line will, of course, be when the Elizabeth line opens. In fact, our modelling suggested or strongly showed, in fact, that when the Elizabeth line opens end to end, in other words, from the east end at Shenfield through to Heathrow in the west and Reading in the west, there will be an annual addition to our bottom line of £500 million a year as this wonderful new railway attracts more business and more people to come to London. Now, that's in normal times. £500 million, we need that investment and we need that income. And even in tough pandemic times, once we get it open, that will, of course, not only add to capacity, so that will aid social distancing on the central line, but it will add to our bottom line because I'm sure people will flock to it. But the key thing is we've got to get Crossrail finished. We've got to get the Elizabeth line open. So here's the rub. I made it a condition of me taking this job. At my job interview, I actually said, for me, a showstopper was I have to have direct carriage of the Crossrail project pretty much from day one. Why is that? Well, because previously the Crossrail project was managed by an arm's length entity called the Crossrail Limited Board. I think they did a good job in that they inherited a woeful situation in 2018. And bear in mind, it was supposed to open in 2018, and suddenly, bizarrely, we found that we had another 3 years to go. So the CRL board did a good job in getting the project in a better shape. But ultimately, I felt vulnerable as a commissioner. I can't control getting that project across the line unless I have control of that project. So I insisted that that be brought under TfL jurisdiction immediately, not in sort of 6 months, 8 months time, as was originally the plan. Now, of course, the easy way out would have been to have said, I'm not touching that with a barge pole. It's got all sorts of controversy around it. I'll turn up on opening day whenever that is. But someone has to step up to the plate and someone has to take control of this thing and get it done. So that's what we have achieved. We negotiated with the DfT. We negotiated with other stakeholders. And sure enough, 95 days into our tenure as a new management group, within the first 100 days, that project now comes under TfL jurisdiction. So what does that mean? Well, I have publicly said, and this is my public position, there will be no further slippage on the schedule that the CRL board declared in their dying days, which is that the section through the middle will open in the first half of 2022. Itself a further slippage, by the way, from what they had been saying. But they said when they resigned, the best date or the earliest date will be the beginning of 2022 to get that central section open. And then end-to-end running would be achieved about a year later, and it needs £1.1 billion more in order to finish the job off. So my public position is, and I've said it publicly, you can hold me accountable, there will be no further slippage and there will be no further recourse to public funds over and above what the Crossrail board announced. But I don't mind saying to you, I have challenged my team to improve upon both. I want it open sooner, and I want to open it for less than that 1.1 billion. I'm not making a public declaration on that because you only get one shot at a revised date, but let me give you my assurance that we are doing our damnedest to get it open sooner than that official public position. The final thing I wanted to say was around Christmas travel. And obviously, you know, this year is going to be really difficult for commerce in the West End. It's going to be very different to what we've previously enjoyed here in London. So there will be some service changes. We won't be running all year on New Year's Eve as we normally will, because the government have already announced that the fireworks at the South Bank will not be running. So there's absolutely no point in us running an all-night service. Having said that, we are planning on some enhanced services because, you know, we suspect that people will still want to go in to do their shopping. We will continue to engage with you, the retail and hospitality industry, to understand your plans for the period and what you need and any concerns that you've got and anything that you want to reach out to us to help with. We will continue to encourage people to come back onto the service and that it's safe to do so. And we will continue to support and work with you on your plans for car-free days in the weekends leading up to Christmas, should government advice allow that. I want us to do our bit. You can liaise with me. You can count on TfL to do its bit to make sure that we facilitate the safe carriage of people on mass transport to London, to central London, to the West End in order to do their Christmas shopping. And I actually predict that there will be quite an uplift when the lockdown comes off, if it comes off on December the 2nd, which we're told it will. When that lockdown comes off, I predict that there will be such a surge in pent-up demand that we will see a big surge in ridership. That's certainly my hope. We will be ready. We will be ready. We're going to maintain the service levels that we've got. And the only caveat I would put on that is if there was a catastrophic COVID outbreak amongst our staff, but rest assured we have measures in place to control that kind of thing. But we will be ready to react, to provide the capacity that's needed. And furthermore, working with organisations such as yourselves, we will make sure that we are alive to, that we're listening to the type of service that you want from us, and that we know what your plans are, and that we can support those car-free days. We stand ready and able because we see ourselves as a key part of London's economy and its economic recovery. So the final thing I wanted to mention, Martin, before we go to questions, was just the longer term. The longer term, to me, the prize is Britain's economic recovery. And there's no question, as an adopted Londoner, people may talk about a levelling up agenda, and I get that. I sign up to the idea that Britain should be a more equal economy. But it is entirely simplistic to say that it's a case of, right, London's had its share, now it's time to not give London any money and to give the other parts of the country the money that London previously enjoyed. To me, that is simplistic. London makes a net contribution of £36 billion to the UK exchequer every year. So if we cut that off, ultimately that will be false economy, and ultimately it will be self-defeating. Investing in Transport for London is a critical part of the national recovery. The government wants a building-led recovery. We can help with that. Things like Crossrail 2, the Bakerloo line extension, and other projects that we want to deliver, Piccadilly line re-signalling, we can help with that to get Britain moving again. The government wants a green agenda and a green-led recovery. Let's electrify the bus fleet. Let's push on with electrifying our bus fleet so that, again, that makes for a more pleasant travelling environment for people coming into the West End to do their shopping. And the government wants a levelling up agenda. again, we can help with that. 55p of every pound of TfL's capital project budget is spent in the regions, buying steel from Scunthorpe, buying buses in Falkirk, building trains in Goole, East Yorkshire. So my message, Martin, to close, is we can help with that, with all of those government objectives. Anything you can do, West End businesses, commerce and retail, anything you can do to help the clamour that we're putting up to properly fund TfL means that we can continue to serve you, and we continue as a team to refuel and drive London's economic recovery. Thank you.
And thank you for that, Andy. We will go to the questions in a moment. Just to remind you, though, if you haven't put a question and you want to, all you need to do is click on that question mark icon in your webinar window right now. So there's an issue which has come up on a number of different people have put this point, and it was one which was occurring to me as I was hearing you speak. I'll read out the question. Despite the enforcement of wearing masks, we are still seeing a lot of people on public transport without face coverings or not using masks properly. Will more control be given to TfL staff to refuse access to transport without masks and to hand out fines? It's clearly not working at the moment, so many people are allowed on the tubes without masks, and it's causing people to feel unsafe.
Yeah, sure. This is a challenge. It really is. I believe as a leader, you should stand shoulder to shoulder with your troops. You shouldn't just send them into battle to do difficult jobs without at least showing support for them. So I have stood on the gate line. I stood on the gate line at Waterloo, and I went out east to Stratford, and I stood there to help encourage people, ask people, insist to people that they either wear masks or show their appropriate means of exemption. And it is a relentless challenge. In Zone 1, Waterloo was pretty good, actually. For the most part, people were wearing masks. We just had to ask them to pull them up in some occasions. People still don't seem to get. It's not meant to be worn like here. It's supposed to cover your nose and mouth. And where I went out east in Stratford was really quite a challenge. And so I have spoken to the British Transport Police Commissioner, Chief Constable. We're also engaging the Metropolitan Police to help with our enforcement of surface routes such as buses and trams. But it is a relentless challenge. It's some people just refuse and get quite violent, actually, when they are told that they need to either have a mask or show a means of a proof of exemption. So do we make our staff insist? No, we don't. We say to the staff, do try to get people to wear masks, but they're not police officers. Same as the people on this call, the shop assistants, they're not police officers. There was a bus operator murdered, beaten to the point that he actually subsequently died in France because he tried to enforce the wearing of masks. So it needs to be backed by the police. We will keep doing our damnedest to enforce this, but ultimately society has to want to do this. We can't play the policeman.
It's very frustrating. I'm sure I speak for many people when you see people on the tube not putting the mask on, or on the buses not putting the mask on. But it has to be said, when I look around most of the time before the second lockdown, most people are actually using masks.
They are, Martin. I use the service every day. I've never owned a car in my life. I rely on public transport, so I'm out there, I'm looking, and I used the Bakerloo line yesterday, and I'm going to say it's 100% compliant. Now that varies. It does depend where you go. It does depend on the time of day, but we're not going to let up on this. And I advocate a pretty bullish line on fining. Our staff themselves can't fine, but they can do so in conjunction with the BTP and the Metropolitan City of London Police. So we'll keep on it.
This one from Joe. Do you think passenger numbers, will ever be as consistently high as they were before COVID? During the pandemic, more people are cycling or walking in London. Do you think there will be a permanent shift away from the underground, especially?
Sure. Well, I think the simple answer is yes. I think it will absolutely soften. I hate the expression new normal, because if new normal is all the attributes of what we currently have, that's kind of a depressing place to be. So I resist that. But look, at the end of the day, I think that there will be a softening in that I think some there's going to be people who now figure out that you can actually successfully work from home. There will be big employers who realize that you don't have to have such a big overhead in terms of office portfolios. So there will be some softening in that regard. And with the Mayor's Street Space programme, we have actively encouraged people and enable people to use other alternatives such as cycling and walking. So I think that there will be a softening of ridership. I don't think people in the future will find it acceptable to be rammed onto the Central Line or the Northern Line. But at the end of the day, I'm also a great believer in London. London is a world city. Those people that write it off and say that's it for London, it's going to be, it's a ghost town from now on, I just don't buy that. So we've modelled 5 scenarios. One, the absolute super optimistic scenario, which says this thing will be done in a couple of months when the vaccine's out, everyone will come flooding back, through to central economic zone is dead and there'll be 45% ridership. But I think the reality, Martin, will be somewhere in the middle, and it will take time, but I think we'll at least get back to 85% in the next 2 to 3 years, and certainly we'll be actively promoting safe use of public transport throughout.
Okay, I want to bring up on a theme here, which a number of people have raised. Attracting customers back to the West End has been challenging this year, and asking them to pay for congestion charge during the weekend hasn't helped. Considering the high levels of debt the TfL is facing, is it safe to assume that tube, bus, rail ticket prices will increase again? And how are you supporting the local West End businesses to thrive again if it's becoming more and more expensive to travel to the area?
Yeah, sure. So I'd say the way we're supporting businesses is by running a pretty much near capacity, near full schedule of public transport. That's our best contribution, that we offer a reliable, a quick, a clean and a safe environment. We can't directly subsidize businesses. We're recipients of public taxpayers' pounds. That at the end of the day, we're not in the business of subsidizing. What we are in the business is of enabling. So that's our primary contribution. I am aware, of course, of the controversies around congestion charging. Some of this is above my pay grade. Some of it relates to government policy or City Hall policy. But it is something that we are keeping a close eye on. Obviously, the expanded operating hours does contribute to our bottom line. So if we were to change that, then that would make our financial situation worse still. But I'm certainly not deaf to these criticisms or these concerns, and it is something that I am feeding back to City Hall and central government on a regular basis.
Okay. Let's move away from COVID for just a moment. The terrorist threat in the UK has been raised from substantial to severe. How does TfL respond to these security changes?
Sure. So we are, as you would imagine, in daily, probably more accurately hourly contact with the security services. We've got a very sophisticated relationship with the security services and with the BTP city and metropolitan police services. So we do have extensive dialogue with them. We understand what the prevailing threat situation is. We have an extensive security network ourselves in terms of security paraphernalia, CCTV and other measures. I think our greatest asset in many ways is the fact that we have 27,000 direct employees, but also the contracted staff, lots of eyes and ears out there, and ultimately customers' eyes and ears looking for anything that looks suspicious, any suspicious behaviours, any suspicious parcels, anything like that. At the end of the day, you can't, experience has shown that if someone is really determined to attack what is at the end of the day an open system, it's not an airport. We can't put everyone through a metal detector every time they open a bus, or get on a bus or go into the tube. But we are very, very watchful and constantly on guard for terrorist or security related issues. It's something that if you would say to me what keeps me up at night, it's the one thing that never leaves you in this job. You constantly dread the 3 a.m. phone call. So I don't take that lightly. We leave no stone unturned in making sure that we're following security service advice and we're being proactive in that regard.
Good to hear. Where will the extra Crossrail funding come from for the full opening of the Elizabeth line?
Yeah, so that will be a mixture of central and GLA funding. That is actually being finalised at the moment. It's a very good question. It's a very topical question, because although it is allied to or complementary to the TfL H2 funding deal that we secured on Halloween, it is actually a separate funding source. So that is something that's top of my to-do list at the moment. We need to get that deal finalised, because otherwise we'll run out of financial authority for Crossrail very, very soon. You know, I don't want to spook anyone with that. That won't happen. We're going to get this thing finished. We're going to get it open. It'll blow people's minds when you see it. It is spectacular. I visited most of the stations. They're nearly done. We've got the systems integration, dynamic testing, trial operations, trial running and safety case to finish off. So there's still some big challenges, but the funding package is being finalised. You know, at the end of the day, I want this job finished, and that's why I made it one of my top 2 equal priorities.
So next question, is the chaos surrounding the closure of Hammersmith Bridge on your agenda, and will it be resolved before 2027, which is when the press are reporting it will be? The knock-on effect to traffic and pollution in the west and southwest of London is causing misery to many.
Yeah, we're very aware of that, and there's been quite a lot of misinformation flying around about that, and it's often the case. Guess who gets the blame? TfL. Well, funnily enough, that's not a TfL asset, which doesn't mean to say we're saying not my problem, but you know, I am going to stick up for my organisation here and say that actually TfL had proposed solutions throughout last year. We were awaiting the requisite government funding in order to do what we needed to do to help the boroughs, the 2 affected boroughs, repair what is actually a very old structure. So we totally recognise the impact of that bridge closure has had, and we have stepped up. I've assigned one of my most senior officials to it. One of my 2 operational managing directors has personal carriage of this. The deputy mayor, my boss, Heidi Alexander, is liaising directly with Baroness Veer, the Minister of Transport, to finalise what needs to be done. TfL is procuring a ferry service for £4 million. There's a £4 million budget to procure and run a ferry service to at least get crossings going again. We have provided some ideas on a potential solution, initially to get cyclists and pedestrians back using the bridge, but ultimately full repairs in order to get heavy traffic, you know, trucks and buses, able to use the bridge again. So I think it's too early to say the time frame. I've seen what time frames people have talked about. I'm not an engineer, but it is a complex job. But certainly between us, it's you know, TfL, the boroughs, central government, everyone's got to step up to the plate there, and I'm absolutely committed to doing our part to get it fixed. Even though it's not our asset, that's not the point. We need to play our full part in getting that bridge reopened.
Okay, question here from Ros Morgan from Holber. Does TfL have any evidence it would be willing to share in support of the removal of the 10 p.m. curfew in central London?
Look, I mean, at the end of the day, I guess that's the curfew itself is a government decision. But I think what I can say to Ros is we have concerns, same as you do. The problem with the 10 p.m. curfew is it's somewhat self-defeating. If one of the reasons for putting the curfew in is to minimize the spread of COVID and to minimize the risk that contains, well, having everyone leave all at once and pile onto a bus or pile onto a tube station all at once is exactly what you don't want to happen. So we have already submitted evidence to government, or we fed back what our ridership statistics look like and surges at particular locations. And we have had to introduce controls to stop those surges happening, to contain the flow or control the flow of people leaving the West End, for example, and going into Oxford Circus or Bond Street stations. So we have concerns, same as you do, Ros, and colleagues on the call. To me, it's not really a well thought through strategy. I'd be happy to share the data in terms of what we were seeing at busy stations, the sudden influx of customers, which to me, as I said earlier, seems completely self-defeating and counterproductive.
Are TfL considering implementation of flexible season tickets for workers and others who are travelling less frequently? Are you also aware of similar moves from the TOCs, I think that's the train operating companies, for workers travelling into the capital? That's from Dan.
Yeah, sure. So Dan, good question. The TOCs are considering that. That's something that they're discussing as part of what's called RGG, which is the Rail Delivery Group. And I know there's an active discussion going on with government in order to do just that. So that, if you do pay, I don't know, £15,000 a year for a season ticket Monday through Friday, can't you have something a bit more flexible? Now, TfL is in a different position because, of course, it's somewhat moot for TfL. We already have capping. If you use an Oyster card, which a lot of people do, we already have capping. So effectively, if you only use your effectively what is the equivalent of your season ticket for 2 or 3 days a week, well, that's what you'll pay. And if you reach a certain threshold, it will cap. So I don't really see it's as much of an issue for us. We do have flexible pricing via Oyster. The TOCs don't, and we've offered that, and certainly government's interested on this. What will really help is if there is a contactless Oyster type solution for the whole of the country. That will help government achieve what everyone's saying they want. So we're on the case, and certainly the TOCs are on the case as well.
Question here about Crossrail again. Is the expectation that when Crossrail opens that Bond Street station will open, or will this be at a later date?
Okay, again, pardon?
That's right, that's from John.
John, right, John. A good question, John. My view is, and again, this has yet to be, at the end of the day, this is what we're aiming for. I have a real simple view on Crossrail, the Elizabeth line, as in phase 3. Phase 3 being the central section from Paddington to Liverpool Street. And my simple view is this: open means open. It doesn't mean non-stopping unfinished stations. So there is, you're right, Bond Street is the laggard. Bond Street, and actually Whitechapel's got some issues that need to be caught up. So one of the benefits of bringing this in-house, which I insisted upon, I wanted control of this, was that, and again, a benefit, I guess, of having worked across the world is you build up a mental shopping list of who could help you on things. In Toronto, I had to get a subway extension open, and that was in a similar deficient state. It was running late. And I worked with a few people who just worked miracles. And we've brought 2 of them in. I brought one guy out of retirement. This poor sod had his retirement all lined up. We've gone out, we've got him. He's a stations completion expert. I think he is the world expert at doing it. His mission is to get Bond Street across the line. So, today, standing here today, I can't say with absolute certainty that Bond Street won't still be a little later, maybe January or February. But no, the intention is open means open, and he's already getting stuck into it. He believes it's possible to recover the slippage for Bond Street. So watch this space, John.
Good to hear. This is another question from Ros Morgan from Holber. What support or role could the West End business community provide in securing a better long-term deal for TfL?
I think working with us to show what the impact is, the positive impact of a viable transport system in the connection, the symbiotism, if you like, with a vibrant West End and the billions that the West End generates because it's got such an attractive hospitality and retail offer. So in order to achieve that attractiveness, you've got to have an efficient, clean, reliable transport system to get people to and from it, and to encourage people to get out of their cars. We don't want gridlock. We don't want all of the air pollution that would ultimately put people off going there. So I think work with us to, it's information that you've got, data that you've got that shows the value that people attribute to being able to get in and out of the West End easily, and independently lobby government. The more this is, if government, central government just thinks, well, it's TfL moaning again, and TfL would say that, wouldn't they? If also, though, it's TfL, it's business, it's commerce, it's retail, everyone's saying you've got to fund it. We know that the UK economy is in dire straits, £2 trillion debt. But ultimately, if we're to pull out of this, you can't give up on public transport. You've got to fund it properly. So anything that you can do in terms of data and showing the linkage between public transport and a viable, successful £1 billion contributing to the Exchequer economy would be most helpful.
Okay, another question here on the similar subject. Congestion is mainly due to necessary roadworks through central London. Surely you see the extension to 10 PM and the weekends is nothing other than a cash raising, albeit noted that TfL needs that cash. It will continue to depress the evening economy. Please review.
Sure. So look, at the end of the day, and I'm not sure how much people realise this, TfL, part of the funding deal was we had to maintain that extension. So A, we need the money. B, we didn't really have a choice. So we are reviewing it, though. It is something that I am aware people do have concerns about. It is something that we keep under review. We're listening. There may be some tweaks that are possible, but that would not be something I could unilaterally decide. Ultimately, that will be a matter that I need to take to both City Hall and to central government. As for roadworks, yeah, they're a necessary evil. I think one of the problems that's been caused in recent years by the fact that TfL's funding has been inadequate is that we have had to safely put some repairs on hold, which is always false economy. If you get behind with your state of good repair, it takes years and it costs more to catch up. So I'm a big proponent of maintaining state of good repair funding. It's a slippery slope if you allow that to degrade.
Okay, what's the reason behind free travel for under 18s being scrapped? The questioner has noted that it has been pushed back to next year, but obviously wants a bit more of an explanation as to why.
So that was something we were explicitly instructed, required to look at as part of the H1, the first half of the year funding settlement from central government. It was a condition of funding. The rationale behind it was that central government felt, as part of the levelling up agenda, that Londoners, if Londoners want to get benefits greater than what is enjoyed elsewhere in the country, in other words, concessions such as free travel for over 60s and free travel for under 18s, that's fine, but London has to pay for that, because the argument is that kids in Barnsley don't get to ride for free, and other seniors in the rest of the country have to wait till 65. So that was a condition of the funding deal. If you don't agree to this, you don't get the money. So absolutely, those were our marching orders. We looked into it. It's actually, we did advise at the time, it's very complex. It's a very difficult thing to just take that away, because we have statutory obligations to vulnerable children from low income families, but also who have to travel longer distances. And we made the argument that actually London kids rely more on public transport than elsewhere because they travel further. The good news is, in the H2 settlement, that does appear to have been dropped. So for now, I wouldn't say it's absolutely dead in the water, but it's certainly not something that we're pushing.
Are we going to see any 2-for-1 deals over Christmas, to transport deals to get people back into the system? Is that something that you're looking at?
Well, certainly, we've been looking at all sorts of options. I was interested. I thought the Chancellor's Eat Out to Help Out scheme was a really good idea, and I hear that there's talk of resurrecting that. So we had a discussion amongst my executive, and we did knock around a few ideas, and one of the ideas we did consider, and we actually put up for consideration, again, you need to get political approval for these things, was some sort of welcome back ticket, because the reason we felt that that might be necessary was there's a lot of there is concern about public transport, and a lot of that is through ignorance. If if you've not tried riding the tube again or the bus, it might be because you assume, oh, it's going to be a nightmare, it's going to be really crowded, no one wears masks and it's really dirty, or you've been told that. Actually, the reality is quite different, wholly different. Most people do wear masks. There is social distancing and it is squeaky clean. So what we tossed around was some sort of welcome back free ticket to Oyster card holders to just get them to sample it, because we think that they would then become a convert. Now, at the end of the day, that does cost money, and we're hardly in the position of throwing around money. I think we'd be criticised for it when we are wholly dependent on government emergency funding. So we would need to get political approval for that, or we would need to have sponsorship for that. So it's not dead in the water. We are considering it. Anyone watching, your ideas would be really welcome.
Okay, question here from Cynthia. With the introduction of an increasing number of schemes all over London to benefit pedestrians and cyclists, do you think enough thought is being given to how the overall network in London is working for other traffic, much of it essential traffic such as buses and delivery vehicles, which seem to be increasingly caught in network gridlock as road capacity is reduced drastically? That's from Cynthia.
Sure. So it is a controversial subject, and only this morning I was talking to a leader of a borough about another element of that, which is low traffic neighbourhoods. So that plus the street space schemes, which is pavement widenings and introduction of bike lanes, all of these things are controversial. So the background to this is that central government, and to be fair, City Hall did ask us to look at very, very quickly, working with boroughs and for the TfL road network, look at schemes to quickly provide more social distancing space on pavement, so widening schemes, and to look at how we might rapidly expedite the installation of cycle lanes on a temporary basis to see how they worked. So that's what we've done. Now, it was done reasonably quickly because we wanted to prevent a mass return to car traffic. If everyone got back into their cars and we had a mass car-led recovery, then gridlock really would ensue, and you would end up with the buses hopelessly mired in traffic, which would make them even less attractive, and you get into a downward spiral. So a number of schemes have been introduced. Some have really worked. Some need some tweaks. Some, if I'm frank, should come out. And we have been taking action to review them. We review them using data. It's not a subjective thing. We look at, did they achieve the benefit for which they were intended, for which they were conceived? What has been the impact on bus journey times? What has been the impact on end-to-end travel times? Have they achieved the objectives that they were set out to do? And in some cases, we've actually taken schemes out, or we've pared them back. So this is something we're keeping under a very close review. Certainly, if a bus lane, if a bus route, for example, is suddenly massively inhibited by the presence of a bike lane, then I've got a problem with that. I want my buses getting through the streets quickly. But what we're trying to achieve here is a compromise of objectives: cleaner air, less cars, but still maintain the attractiveness of public transport. Okay,
question here about Oyster cards. Is our beloved Oyster card on its way out? What's the future of travel cards?
No, Oyster London TfL initiated contactless payment. It's an absolute world leader. It's not a surprise to me that two of my former employers, Transport for New South Wales and Sydney, promptly went and bought effectively Oyster via the same supplier, and they call it Opal Card. And my last employer, the MTA in New York, is now installing, believe it or not, only just installing contactless and what's called an Omni card, which is One Metro New York. So contactless payment, either via a debit card, credit card, phone, wearable device such as a watch, or the Oyster card, upon which travel card is loaded, I'm not aware of any plans to get rid of them.
Okay, question here from Ben. How are the plans being developed by TfL to take over the management and running of the suburban rail routes in London previously operated by South Eastern, for example? And have these discussions with the Department of Transport now been put on ice, considering the COVID pandemic and the state of TfL finances? That's from Ben.
Well, they've certainly been delayed by that, Martin. There's a number of very compelling candidates. I mean, the Great Northerns in and out of Moorgate are a classic example. That to me is an obvious candidate to what is called metroisation, in other words, to bring it into the TfL fold. And it does seem to me that any of the services, the commuter services, the near the suburban services that serve the Greater London area, there's an argument that, to which I subscribe, by the way, that they should come under TfL jurisdiction. We're not talking about taking over trains to Ramsgate or Weymouth, but certainly the inner suburbans, absolutely, that makes sense. So South Eastern and Great Northern, they're all on our shopping list. That we are talking to government about them, but it is true to say absolutely they've been somewhat delayed, because quite simply, there's not enough bandwidth with government and even within TfL. We're all hands to the pump fighting the pandemic and to get London recovering. But that has not come off the to-do list, and it's certainly on our aspirations. We want to get it done.
Okay, we've got time for just two last questions. We'll have to keep these quite sharp and to the point because we are running out of time, unfortunately. But this one from Dan. Will we see the TfL grant funding opportunities for positive change in the public realm in the near future, such as TfL Livable Neighbourhood and Healthy Streets for Business Funds? He notes he appreciates that TfL finances are squeezed to the limits, but that's from Dan.
I'm not quite sure I understand the question. So it's just say again, Martin.
He says, will we see the TfL grant funding opportunities for positive change in the public realm? Does that give you enough?
Yeah, sure. So yes, public realm. We're aware of a number of schemes. I mean, things like the Oxford Circus scheme. I was talking to people from the West End just the other day. There are a number of schemes that we still want to pursue. We can't do them on our own. We need good developer partnerships and local authority partnerships, but absolutely I want to push on with our public realm contributions, 100%.
And the last question, what is the TfL stance on the ongoing air pollution caused by idling black cabs throughout the West End?
Well, for starters, we're looking to progress towards an all-electric taxi fleet. We've made some progress into that. There are rules about idling, which we do enforce. I was out at Victoria Station just the other day with our team, where they do unannounced checks on cabs. Not only is the vehicle compliant, but we do checks on idling. The ultimate solution is to move away from diesel and petrol and to get those cabs electrified and to provide the infrastructure to support that. So one of many things, it's one of the things I love about this job, it's a very, very, very full inbox, but loving it. Lots to do.
It certainly is, and we appreciate you taking your time away from your inbox to tell us what's in your inbox, and a really good session, Andy. Thank you very much indeed. That is actually the last of the sessions for this year. We will be back though in 2021. To all of you who've been watching throughout the year, thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next year. Bye-bye.